everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Attachment Theory in Action podcast. Today, I am very excited to be able to welcome one of our own from Chaddock. I'm going to be talking to Sarah Goodapple. Sarah is a family coach with Chaddock Foster and Adoption Services, and she brings a wealth of experience and specialized training to her role. With over 2 years at Chaddock and 12 years as a trainer for American families transitioning to overseas living, Sarah has honed her ability to support families through complex challenges. Sarah is trained in our developmental trauma and attachment program, and her primary focus is to empower families to learn how to manage difficult behaviors and emotions, which are often rooted in trauma and/or attachment challenges. Our family coaching program emphasizes adult-led activities designed to strengthen parent-child relationships and foster healthier connections. In July, Sarah expanded her skill set by training as a puppeteer with the Kentucky Kids on the Block program. This initiative equips her to deliver impactful puppet shows in the Tri-County area on critical topics such as child abuse and neglect, bullying, cyberbullying, mental health, and grief and loss. By using puppets, Sarah creates an engaging, age-appropriate platform for children to explore sensitive issues, encouraging them to communicate with trusted adults like teachers or guidance counselors. Today, however, Sarah is going to be talking to us about a very special new release that we have developed here at Chaddock. It's our very first children's book called Chad the Cougar, and we are so excited to bring this to our Attachment Theory in Action listeners and tell you more about it. And yeah, I can't wait. So let's welcome Sarah. Well, hi, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
We're going to have a great conversation today about our great new book that we have put together. But first of all, my regular listeners know this. I love to start my podcast with the same question because we know how much our early life can influence, how we turn out as adults and the journeys that we take. And so I really wanted to ask you, is there anything that in your early life or even in your career that has brought you down this path and got you to a place of being a family coach with Chaddock? Tell us a little bit about your journey and your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did grow up here in the Quincy area, which is where Chaddock is located. And I early on was I felt called into missions, and so I spent several years overseas as a missionary, and then returned back stateside and did end up getting my social work degree. Just felt compelled to help families. That has been a part of my work since I was 18 years old, working with children and families. And so in my social work degree, it's kind of funny. I said I never would ever work in child welfare. However, God led me here to Chaddock. I served with a missions organization for many years, training families to do life overseas, so cross-cultural work. And so working with children and families in that context. And then when we decided to move back home to Quincy, I had the opportunity to kind of reinvent myself. What do I want to be when I grow up? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to dust off that social work degree and dive in, and led me to Chaddock originally as a caseworker in working with like DCFS cases. But through my work here at Chaddock, we have an amazing team of clinical support. So we have therapists and family coaches that really come alongside families, both the biological families and the foster families. And it was through that I was really intrigued of what is this group over here doing. And so when an opportunity came, I was able to make a transition from being a caseworker into the family coach position. And it has been one of the greatest decisions of my life. And I am so glad I didn't listen to the 20-year-old version of Sarah that said never to child welfare, because I truly am so happy and fulfilled to do the work that I'm doing. And just that through line of children and families are still at the root. And so my entire adult career has been working with that same group, different contests. I'm not working with missionaries anymore, but it's just amazing to see where it's all led me.
That's awesome. And I love your comment. I'm glad I didn't listen to my 20-year-old self. I think that I think some people do have this path and they know that they're on it and they follow it and that's wonderful. But for many of us, myself included, it's like, well, I have this idea, but then that doesn't work out. And sometimes you feel a little bit lost, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, you end up where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
Or at least, I don't know, that's what it feels like for me too, working at Chaddock and where we're supposed to be. But I also love that you're a family coach,
Mhm.
that, in our world, in the attachment and trauma world, you know, there's always therapists involved, clinicians involved, but sometimes there's a gap. The child is receiving services. And I think this is what I love about Chaddock too, is that the family is our client. The relationship is our client. It's not
Yep.
just the child. We don't just bring a child in and they get dropped off for services and then they leave again. It's how do we repair the relationship or help support the relationship
Mm.
so that that child can be successful. Tell our listeners just a little bit about some of the maybe the activities or the types of work that you're doing with family
Sure.
members.
Sure. Yeah, just to carry on what you were saying there, like the child is struggling. Like we have so many families that identify it's this kid that is struggling. We're all fine. They're not. And it's like you really get in there. And, in a lot of families, that is like, we're okay, we'll just send that one to therapy and they'll get the help they need. But it's so much more than that. And that is what I love about Chaddock's approach is we do have a therapist and we have a family coach, not in every case, but in a lot of our cases, and that it's that dual relationship. So the child is getting the help they need, and then I'm getting into the family home. I'm hearing from the parents. We're doing assessments. We're kind of digging through and finding all of the pieces. How were the parents parented? What were some of the challenges? What is their parenting style? What is their attachment style? Just kind of really pulling in all of the pieces and then saying, okay, now this is how this child fits into this. And here are some of the ways that we could improve. So it might be communication, it might be discipline, it might be the structure nurture balance, just really getting in there. It's an individualized approach. So it's not like a parenting class that a lot of our families, like our DCF families, have on their service plan. That's like a 16-week course and it's just generic parenting. This is very tailored and individualized to this family specific needs. And so, if it is a structure nurture balance as one of the things that is kind of not right in the family, then I'm coming alongside. I've noticed that that is an area that we need to really tweak. So I'm going to be providing weekly activities and strategies for these families. So that might look like um, if someone is super high on structure, so they're like the drill sergeant parent, then I am going to be working with them of how can we add nurture? So nurture might not come naturally to them. So that might be some drive-by touches on the arm, or it might be a little squeeze saying, hey, I see you. You're a really great kid. Those little moments through the day, making those deposits of just adding in just that nurture side. Or it might be, you know what? You haven't eaten in a while. I'm going to make you a snack. And so it's getting that snack, that drink, that food, and setting it down in front of the child. That is letting that kid know, like, oh wow, they really care about me. They noticed me. They see me. And it's those little activities that are done all along the day that are so important. So therapy is important, but it's only 1 hour a week, or maybe it's 1 hour every 2 weeks. And that is just not enough. This child is hurting. They have unmet needs, and we are coming alongside helping these parents see their kids through a different lens and looking through the behavior to what's underneath. So what is there? Are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they hot? Is there a sensory need that we're not, maybe they're getting too much sensory, or maybe there's not enough. And so really helping these parents become like little investigators of their children. And
I
so
love that word.
yes, so it's just that curiosity and just trying to help meet the needs. And it's one of my favorite things to do is seeing parents like hear these things for the very first time. Sometimes the families that I work with, this is brand new information. Sometimes they're like, whoa, this seems like we're coddling or we're being like gentle parenting, which is not, that is not what we're promoting here. This is not gentle,
Mhm.
but it is very much, we are helping these parents become confident and sturdy in their approaches and seeing what's underneath.
Mm.
So I love it.
And so, what I'm now thinking of is so we have Chaddock has created this wonderful new children's book, right? And as you're talking, my mind is going to, okay, so we've got these awesome family coaches who can go in, and now we've created this resource that can help maybe continue that progress when the family coaches aren't in the room with them, right? So
Yeah.
tell our listeners why, a little bit more about why we decided to write the children's book, and what the goals are for it, and
Yeah.
yeah, just you can
Well,
share.
shameless plug. Here is our book, and I'm so excited. I had the opportunity, even though I'm a full-time family coach here at Chaddock, I was asked to be on the team to help develop this idea. And I had the opportunity to do all of the artwork and illustrations for the book. So super excited. Such a great project. A whole team got together for this idea, and it really, we didn't want it to just be another children's book. We really wanted it to have the Chaddock stamp on it. And so a whole team came together. We had Chaddock is, we have a lot of different things going on around here, lots of moving parts. And so we pulled people from our Chaddock school. We pulled people from our clinical services department. I was brought in as a family coach. There's a little bit of everyone at this table. So much knowledge, so much experience. I mean, I think if we calculated all of the experience at the table, I think there's probably more than 100 years combined experience there, which is, it was really exciting to sit at the table. We did bring in a local children's author, and so he kind of gave us the shell of the storyline, which was Baxter Badger here. He was having a really bad
Lift
day.
the book up just a
Oh,
touch, Sarah. There
yeah,
we
there we go.
go. Now we
Okay.
can see it.
So this is Baxter, and he is a very angry badger, and he was having a bad day and he didn't know why. And our main character, Chad, this is going to be a children's series. So Chad will be a recurring character in every book. Chad came alongside Baxter, and Baxter was saying some really harsh things. Like at one point, he even calls Chad stupid, which,
Mm.
really, really big words. And every time I've read this to children, they have that big reaction of, whoa, we don't say that word. And so Chad goes through the story and is upset. Baxter doesn't understand why he's mad. Chad's like, how can someone be mad and they don't understand why they're mad? Which, I mean, that just speaks to the parents that I work with. Like, what are
Mhm.
they mad about? Like, everything's paid for in their life. Why are they mad? It's like, sometimes people are just mad and they can't put the finger on what is really the problem. Um, anyway, all of this goes, Chad ends up meeting Olivia Owl. Olivia gives him some suggestions of how to just be with Baxter. And then he goes back and does that. And that is exactly what we do with our kids here at Chaddock. Just that idea of being with and sitting with them, letting that back brain kind of calm down and come back to to a more regulated state. And then Baxter is able to finally pinpoint what the problem was. And then in the end, they do some rhythm and do some activities, and they both feel so much better. And so it resolves. It's a
Mm.
beautiful little story. Um, but I love that all of those pieces were not in that original book. Like in the original book, the storyline was just Baxter's mad, Chad comes in and helps them, and they walk away and they're better. Chaddock, though, that team sat together and said, like, what are the pieces of our treatment model, our developmental trauma and attachment program? What pieces can we include to make this really be us?
Mhm.
So not just another social emotional book, but really wanted to have our DNA on it. And so we see those in, pulling in that DDP component of just being with Baxter. So sitting with him, and it's one of my favorite little scenes in the book. There's like a little bird in the tree and they're both just kind of looking out. It's him and his presence co-regulating Baxter's emotions. So Chad is sharing his calm,
Mhm.
and Baxter is then able to come back online and is able to say, actually, there's a bully at school. And then I end up being the one that gets in trouble. And then my mom gets mad at me because I'm getting in trouble at school. And so it's that whole idea of sometimes as parents, as educators, caregivers, we do need to just sit with the tantrum a little bit and not try to fix it and not try to rush them through and just in the crying. um it's that being with and sharing your calm, and then the child is able to open up.
I think for me, you're describing what makes our approach a little more unique to other approaches is that we are trauma informed and attachment based. And so what you're describing, this being with this presence, is one of those kind of foundational pieces of attachment is that I am welcoming you in whatever state you are in, and I am being with you in that state, and everything is okay. Like my presence will allow you to co-regulate and receive that calm. And so the relationship piece is the foundation to everything that we do at Chaddock, whether we work in HR or we're a clinician. It's the relationship comes first, which to me is exactly what you're describing. And then once we have established that safe relationship, then we're able to use some of those other concepts, such as structure and nurture that you mentioned earlier, using our verbal responses to help that child or young person move out of back brain, as you described.
Mm.
And then when we are fully regulated, we can then think about using those front brain or cortex concepts such as like abstract thinking and natural and logical consequences and having that conversation. But you're right, so many of us, especially people who don't do this work on a daily basis, but I will say even myself sometimes jump into fix it mode instead of just sitting in the yuck and being okay with that feeling. And it's understandable, parents, caregivers, teachers, it's hard to sit in those hard feelings, especially if you don't know what to do about it. If there isn't a clear solution, then we really just want to rush through.
Mhm.
And so I love that the book is showing that it's okay to sit with it. And you mentioned earlier too about this is the work that we do with our kids, but this is also the work that we do with our family members, our caregivers, our parents. Our calm, we want to bring calm to the parent or the caregiver so that they can then bring this parallel process, bring that to their child. And so again, I love that the book is a resource to be there when we aren't available, as a reminder to say, here are some of the steps that you can do. You can be a Chad to this Baxter in your life.
Exactly, exactly. And there is at the very back of the book, there's a QR code that will take you to our Chaddock website with all sorts of tools and extra resources to keep you connected with what we're doing here at Chaddock.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So let's talk a little bit about um, like I am really interested in like the value of literacy for our families. So not only are books something that can teach us about something, but what are some of the other benefits of reading with your child or just sharing a book with your child?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of literacy as well, and I try to every family I work with, getting story time added to their routine, especially their nighttime routine, like setting those. This is what we do. Children thrive on knowing what comes next, but especially there's just something with little ones. And we started early. My husband thought I was ridiculous that I was reading to a 2-month old, but all of the books said to do it, so I was doing it whether it felt silly or not. But it was so fun to see. 2 months we weren't getting any reaction, but my baby was hearing my voice in a warm, soothing tone. They were held close to me. And as we got older, so 6 months, we're a little more active and we're doing, baby is seeing my face and I'm turning and showing and making reactions to different words that I say. I'm pointing to pictures and doing all of the different things. Then 2 years old, they're able to maybe say some colors and point at things. Is that a dog? It's a dog. So there's all sorts of really beautiful things that come out of story time with children,
Mhm.
especially using books. We have the colors, the images, the text. There's so many beautiful things that can happen from that, but especially from an attachment standpoint, just all of the good things that that child is getting in that moment, that proximity, the touch, the eye contact, the facial features, like all of those things are giving signals to your child. And you're setting them up for more than just literacy. It is
Mhm.
attunement with the caregiver, and it it matters on so much more than just my kid's going to be a reader someday.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
much more than that, and I think it's a beautiful thing to add.
You're completely right. It starts with that attachment piece and the all of those foundational needs that children have to be held, to have that interaction, and so on. And then, as our kids get older, we can, and their brains develop a little bit more, then we can start thinking about like the themes. So, the theme with the Chad the Cougar book is, how do we learn to think about anger? How do we recognize it? How do we regulate ourselves when we feel that way? And there are so many books out there with themes then that we can start to bring in for our children. And I know we have another book in the works
We
with a
do,
different theme.
we
Why
do.
don't you share a little bit about that? This is
Yeah,
a good time to do that.
yeah, sure. So when we sat down to like this core group of people at Chaddock, what is our overarching goal? We really wanted to just focus on mad, sad, glad, and scared, and just keep that our focus. So Baxter was mad. We have Betsy Beta is going to be our next main character. She lives in the sea of positivity, but she is sad. She is so upset. Beta fish, you may not know this. I didn't know this before I started working with this crew. But beta fish are naturally white, and then they later get their colors. And Betsy, however, does not get her colors, and so she is a white fish in a school of the most beautiful colors. So she feels like she doesn't fit in. She's so different, and is just really sad and having a hard time. And so it's a beautiful message. It's about inclusivity and finding your place and finding your people. And she meets some really incredible characters in this book, which were so much fun to create. I can't wait for the world to see Betsy and the crew. But I'm excited. It's going to be completely different. This, Chad the Cougar was set in a forest, and so this one is then set in the sea, and very much going to be bright and colorful and beautiful, but also a really great story.
So, one of the thoughts that I was having about as we were talking about the experience of reading and the value of it, and obviously bringing out these different themes that we can then talk with our children about. I'm thinking, what if I'm a parent who doesn't feel very comfortable with reading? What if
Mm,
maybe I can't read very well?
sure.
Um, how might you help a parent or a caregiver maybe not necessarily overcome it, but reach a point where they feel more comfortable?
Mhm,
Obviously, if somebody is struggling with reading skills, they would have to
mhm.
go and have some training or learning on it. But what's some reassurance that we could give to our caregivers?
I think just being okay with where you are, so acknowledging, like, they don't know the words, and so maybe they're working with a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old is not going to be able to tell mommy and daddy that these are not the words.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we can look at this picture, and mom and dad can create their own story. The children don't necessarily have to know. And then when we get to school age, allowing the child to read the book. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of forgiveness in that for so many years the children are unaware of what is even on the page other than the pictures. And so mom and dad can even use that as, we're going to create our own story here, and this is what I think is happening in the book. And um you know I think kids are far more forgiving than we think they are. I mean, until they get about 7 or 8, and then they think they know everything. But in those early years, like, it's really on mom and dad to say what's happening. And the kids will be none the wiser if you don't know what the words are on that page. Just make it up.
Well, and it comes back to those words that you used earlier, being with, right? Sometimes, in fact, in early child development, we talk about that sometimes it is even not about the book. It's about, I want to come and sit on your lap and snuggle with you. And I know that if I grab a book, that will happen. And then it transitions into, well, actually, I'm enjoying what I see on the page. So,
Mhm.
um, I think that really, what you're describing is this being okay with just being with and seeing it as a moment of connection. And it doesn't have to be perfect,
I was
none of
just
what,
thinking that it
yeah.
doesn't have to be perfect.
Right. And I guarantee you have said that to numerous families that you've worked with, because we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for real, but we're looking for intention, intentionally finding ways to connect with your children. And having this book is going to be a great tool to help increase that connection.
Exactly.
So, um, Sarah, is there anything else that you want to share? Like you mentioned that we have a series. Um, Anything else about the book that you wanted to share or your experience in writing and being a part of that process?
It was one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do professionally. I grew up loving art. My mom actually wanted me to become an artist when I was a little kid, kind of fostering that. She saw that talent, and I was like, no, no, there's no money. So I chose social work instead of art. But I just love that, God has made it possible for me to be able to do both here. So using my talents, being a part of this team, the creative process has been really fun to be a part of. Every sketch is approved by first the author, and then he and I come together and we put the storyboard together. and kind of get the thumbs up from the whole team if we're ready to move forward with painting. And then just that process of being able to paint and get paid for it, like it's been amazing.
Well, I'm going to go on a slight tangent here, but I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with an author, and he works in schools, and um, we were really talking about like the benefit of the arts
Mhm.
and what it can bring, for our children, especially those who have maybe experienced trauma. And so I don't know if you can speak to that just a little bit about how that outlet allows, what does it bring to your life to be able to do that?
Absolutely. For me, I am a late diagnosis for ADHD, and only found out as an adult that I have had this my entire life. And all of the pieces coming together, art has been one of the greatest things to help me cope with my. I'm not the person that's sitting and like fidgeting like this, but it is an internal uncomfortable. I'm just like my brain is just spinning all the time. And so you will often find me in church or in meetings anytime that I have to sit still and be quiet. I have a little sketchbook that I keep in my purse with little fine line pens, and I am just constantly doodling and sketching, listening fully. And so
Mhm.
professors and things along the way have questioned whether I'm actually paying attention in class, although I had almost a 4.0, so I was okay. But there is just, we all do things differently. And so for this ADHD adult and kid, sketching and doodling was my way to stay in the room and be present and listening, but also able to calm the inner chaos that was happening. And then additionally, like, art can be so therapeutic of just letting out and expressing. Some people journal, some people write songs, all sorts of ways of expressing what is on the inside. And for me, art, it has always been an escape for me to be able to just get it out and
Mhm.
process. So I also just encourage parents and caregivers, like, if you have a kid and maybe their stuff doesn't even look good to you, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. Like, art is expression, and to create and to have that outlet, it doesn't have to look good. So, still go out and buy the art supplies and let those guys just make a mess, because it is so good and so necessary for the human experience. So don't get hung up on that horse doesn't really look like a horse. Let it be like that. You could have a Pablo Picasso in your house right now and not even know it. So let them express the way they want to express. Just let it come out, because there are lots of kids out there that are just like me that are looking for that outlet, and
Mhm.
they need it. So,
And we encourage at Chaddock meeting people where they're at. And so I think that is a big piece of what you've just described is if your child is successful when they're doodling, but you know that they're listening, then let's meet them there. And maybe we have to put some limits around it. I know in the book that Chad meets Baxter where he's at. He doesn't just kind of go in and tell him to be quiet because he's mad necessarily, but it's kind of okay, this is how you are right now, and we need to get to somewhere else, but right now let's start here. And so if art helps, if movement helps, if
mhm,
taking some quiet time helps, meeting
mhm,
them where they're at and then helping them move to a place of success or a healthier place to where they need to be emotionally.
mhm.
Um, I just I just love that our conversation has gone in so many different directions just based on this book.
Yeah.
That to me is an absolute treasure. Like that's the goal of having a children's book that can just stimulate all
Mhm.
of these different pieces that come into play when
Yeah.
we're working with children and families.
Yeah. And like I've had the opportunity to read this to several groups of children, and just like also sitting with them of like, have you ever been Baxter before?
Mm.
Have you ever been Chad? Just letting them kind of see themselves in those different roles, those different places, I think is so healthy for kids to see that sometimes they are going to be the Baxter in the story, the one that's having the tantrum, having the meltdown, having the hard time. Um, and then what it looks like to be a Chad when their friend is having a hard time. It's not their job to try to fix the person and make that person better, but their role is to just be there and be empathetic. Sometimes it means just being quiet and sitting with someone who's having a hard time. And so helping kids think through those different roles and what to do when you're in that place, I think is going to be really helpful for kids.
I am so excited for people to read the book. I just want to take a moment to thank you for joining me today, Sarah. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to just spend an afternoon chatting to you because I think we would go
I
down
feel
so
the
many
same
different
way.
holes. But I am excited to share the book with our listeners. We will make sure that we share the links to purchase the book in our show notes. But Sarah, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll be able to come back next time when maybe when the second book has come out. That would be great.
I love it. I love listening. I subscribe to your podcast, so keep up the great work.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.